All right, Jordan, let's take a look at your paper. MLA format first. Well, first, it's not Times New Roman, so you want to change that. So that's good. This seems to be a different size, it looks like, which make sure all of this is 12 point font anyway. But this is good. I like this idea. I mean, it's kind of your quote, but um, I like the idea of the title itself. I think that's good. All right, for your introduction. Make sure that you get rid of that comma since you have it at the end here. And then Beowulf is actually going to be in quotes, and then you can use the page number, and you don't need to say page, just the page number is fine. What I'd love to see is right after this to talk about this quote, either in the context of the story or kind of what it means to you, sort of thing, and then jump into what it means as you think about high school. So you get into the idea of having fun rather than doing homework or sleeping. So you've perfected the idea of being social. Uh, now, I'm not sure if these are your main points or not. The idea of these three things, or that's just kind of a general overview. But be specific with what your three things are. And this isn't a message yet. Yes, you've done this, but that's not what it's taught you. Because you've procrastinated and avoided and changed the subject on things. What has it done for your life? What has it done to make you a better person or a better individual or a worse person or worse individual? I'm not sure, but you need to do that. Pretty short introduction. I'd love to see you at the end of your senior year having a little more elongated introduction and really building on that topic. All right, so let's talk about your procrastination and specifically with this paper. A couple of things, sentence structure wise, but having a girlfriend who consumed all the spare time and video games I could play constantly, get rid of that comma. But this doesn't make sense. But having a girlfriend, doing these things did what? But you start with I couldn't focus hard enough. So rearrange that sentence. But having a girlfriend and playing these video games would not allow me to focus hard enough or something like that. That sentence structure is weak. So my parents were droning on and on. You need to get your homework done like yesterday. I'm assuming that's your mom maybe talking. And then, so get rid of that period, get rid of that comma, and you're grounded. I never really knew what that meant. Make sure that's a complete sentence. But that would be an intriguing, actually, little side note, because maybe that made sense for you why that didn't motivate you, because maybe your parents grounded you but it never really was a grounding and that didn't motivate you at all either. So that actually could play into it, although I don't want to necessarily know all your parents parenting habits, but you know what I mean. uh, Although they had finally come up to me when the deadline being a day away and I had not a single word on the paper. Again, I think you might be able to sentence structure a little bit better that way. Never make reference to the paper that you're writing, so I would definitely focus on that. So you talk about pressing on and trying to accomplish this task, uh, and said you don't need a comma there. Uh, then you go on to talk about. I like this analogy here, this metaphor, like a new kid to the school playing dodgeball, class full of jocks and jerks. Good alliteration too. I really like this analogy here. And even you got a little alliteration there, hopelessly and horrendously outclassed. So you've learned a lesson, which is important. Again, whatever lesson you're learning needs to come through in all your body paragraphs. And I'm assuming this is where I and your mom and many other teachers harp on you about, yes, you can accomplish these things at the last minute. Is it indicative of your best work? Is it indicative of who you really are as a talent? And of course, we can get on and on and on about that, Jordan, but that's not the time or place for this. So let's continue. All right. Again, I love your voice in here. Wickedly cool and smooth jazz tunes. Although I will tell you, ginormous is beneath you. So I wouldn't necessarily do that. But go back through and again think about sentence structure. There's a couple sentence structure, and maybe it's commas, maybe it's just rearranging things. This is the one. This sentence right here. I would rearrange it. I once suffered through a Saturday detention for it. comma, but it was worth every second. So just rearranging some of these second sentences to elongate them and or make them flow a little bit better, and get rid of those awkward comma, usage ideas in there. So if I'm trying to get this paragraph down, it was worth every second. I was mainly angry at myself, which I'm not exactly sure. You've never really shown this yet. In this paper, were you angry at getting the detention? Or were you angry at being lazy? Were you angry at whatever? But the productivity of the work I had done that wasn't for school was incredibly high. So you don't need any commas there. The feelings of laziness and not wanting to put forth the effort to get better had me in the mindset of a professional musician who had all the knowledge he needed to rock a set. So are you saying that your laziness made you feel like a professional musician, which made you feel like, hey, I don't need I don't know. I just feel like you could really explore this a little bit more. School wasn't important to my success as a musician, and that's because you could be lazy. Thinking about the last paragraph, you could be lazy and not do things. You could do things at the last minute and you'd still turn out okay, and so on and so forth. I'm not exactly sure where you were going with that. I could focus on other things and still progress at a decent rate. Still focus on other things, jazz or drumming wise, and still progress at school, or vice versa. I'm not sure. So I think there needs to be a little bit more explanation for that. Laziness can pay off after all. Interesting. So we'll see how that turns out later in the paper, not in life. All right, high school, 2 words. Make sure you fix that. Now, this is because I know you. This actually paragraph is not fit the mold of the rest of the paragraph. I can actually see you making some connections in the last 2 paragraphs as far as you are learning things, and maybe they're not things that us high school teachers would want you to learn, but you are learning them, which is fine. This is diving into satire at this particular point, because of the whole idea of this might be true a little bit here about the idea of just milking the system, which might be fine. The feeling of being a rich kid with everything handed to him set into my skin too deep, and was what I really wanted in life. So, no comma there. That's where I feel like you're learning that you can be lazy, but I'd want to see, you can get to this point as far as milking the system, but I think you're diving into a little bit of satire here and a little bit too much of making fun of the system, which you might argue to me your whole paper is a little satirical, but I think there's a lot of truth to it as well. Make sure any numbers up to 11 you spell out as well. So I like that I don't like that you're being lazy, but I understand the concept of looking for a job and that you tried and you failed, and the lesson is never try, to quote Homer Simpson. So that concept makes sense in the paper, but some of these things, like, I don't know if that's really necessarily true. Is it just that you wanted to be a rich kid? So you decided that because when we think about the concept of being rich, I think that's kind of funny. So anyways, I don't know, maybe there's a different way you can rearrange this paragraph to make more sense, but I want to know what 2 corporations too you signed up for, and maybe even add that you were proud of them and showed them to your parents as a sign that you were doing this, but secretly that's the 2 easiest ones that you found, and blah blah blah. So anyways, I think you can focus on that a little bit more. Also, transitions, make sure you have a transition between these paragraphs, what's tying these 2 things together. And we continue on our path of I'm not sure whether you're being serious or not. So to be or not to be, so good question. I'm sure you know this, but ironically this is about suicide. But when you think about this question, which actually could be a nice tie-in if you think about the concept as a total. Anyways, to be is always the correct answer. So it takes you a long time to get into what this paragraph is actually about. And it took me a couple times to read them instead of going to a crowded, pointless school dance. So this is about, I'm assuming, getting high. So you eventually get to the part that, again, there's two ways of looking at this, Jordan. Either this is a complete crock and you're just doing it to be funny, um, and that's fine. Uh, or you're being truthful, which in case, I mean, I'm not going to judge you for your activities if this is true, but the lessons that you're learning are the ones that are if they are true are disturbing. So and maybe there's a little mixture of both in there, and I don't know. I'm just was hoping for an honest, frank look at your high school life, and I knew from the beginning that you were going to kind of go this route, but it's starting to blur the line a little bit between what it actually is and what it might be. So I don't know, something to think about as you think about organizing. I mean, this again, it seems like so verbal irony um, that I'm like, oh, you're kidding, but then the rest of the paper, I'm pretty sure you're not kidding. So who knows? All right, now we're talking about sleeping. Make sure you fix up your senses. Crucial to selling my life for a treasured time. Uh, and again, this is where you get awkward sentence structure. Most of my life even has been spent being yelled at by the weirdos. Most of my life has been spent, so get rid of all that. Being yelled at by, don't need the comma. The weirdos that call themselves my parents don't need the comma to go to sleep, so I have energy and focus. I still, this is a fragment, I still have no zero idea what those two things are. Here now you go to a run-on sentence. They never told me, so you need to focus or fix those two things. So you talk about sleep, although again, I don't think you don't really dive into too many ideas. Now, every one of your paragraphs ends with this lesson that you're learning, and it's important to learn the lesson. But again, it should be one lesson that you're learning throughout all these concepts. So you really need to focus on that one lesson at the beginning, which will become your thesis statement, and then all of these will be tied together. And mostly, you're probably going to talk about how you're basically counterculture. You're going against everything that is out there in life that all the teachers, all the things your parents and teachers tell you to do, you don't do, and you're still a being accomplished person. So that's really your lesson. But remember, this is a reflection essay too. So you're trying to reflect back on all of your high school experiences, and instead you're just here are the 6 random things I learned in high school. Whereas I want you to reflect a little bit more back on those things. So I like the idea of making your own beefy gaming computer. That's pretty funny. So we go on to talk about computer parts, and again, what did you learn about high school? And we're talking about computer parts. Um, I'm not exactly sure how this fits in with the overall flow, because I could actually understand if you had a paragraph about getting a job and then you tied in the concept of the computer parts. I could see how that would make sense, but like as a standalone, I don't think it makes sense to have it in here, uh, because you're learning a lesson down here. But again, I just talked about having a universal lesson that you're learning. Um, you have a sentence fragment right here that you need to fix. But selling my life and soul for worldly possessions that make me feel great physically and emotionally all at the same time are incredibly worth it. But again, that might be your lesson for this, but I don't think this fits in when I ask you to reflect back on your high school career. Um, I don't think this is the best concept to talk about through that. And this is kind of getting to your message, the idea that going against the counterculture has actually made you a happier person. I mean, I think that's really ultimately your lesson. Um, so anyways, so you get into your conclusion. Again, I'd like to see a more summary of all your body paragraphs. This is kind of a funny line too, which brings back your good voice. Uh, and then you have a really awkward transition into your last statement, which is not a good ending statement since it's just a repeat. This is not your book, so you're definitely going to want to fix that as your citation. So Jordan, interesting to see where you go with this. If you do a rewrite, I'd be intrigued to see how you can reorganize this and reshuffle this around. So good luck.